And it's about the park, right?
It started as a park with the park, but now it represents everything. Everything that they're trying to limit us.
Yeah.
They're trying to put us under. They just don't accept our being existence.
Yeah.
This is about the Taksim Square.
Yeah.
They want to cut all trees. What we don't want that. And we are here.
Yeah.
They want to build a mall.
A mall, yeah.
That's why we advocate.
Since when are you demonstrating? Since when?
No, like 4 days.
4 days already.
4 days.
And you've been here all days and all night?
No.
This is St Stephen's Green Park, in one of Dublin's busiest shopping districts. Not unlike this park is Gezi Park in Istanbul, Turkey, where the recent proposal for the new urban development plan to replace the only green space in the city with a shopping mall has led to the transformation of the space into a place of protest.
Whilst there had been environmental protesters inside Gezi Park for 6 months, they were small in number, and the protest only escalated on the 28th of May. The reason for the escalation was that the night before, the council sent in bulldozers to level the park. The first raids were carried out in the camp at dawn on the 30th of May. Turkish police have been accused of using heavy-handed tactics, and indeed there is some evidence showing that they added chemicals to the water in the water cannon. There is also extensive video evidence of an enormous amount of gas canisters being fired by police at the protesters. While some people have told us that the protesters were violent, the vast majority of people we have spoken to have said they were peaceful.
There was a group of people called Taksim Solidarity who were concerned with the changes in the area and with the regeneration projects, and they had been organizing protests and raising awareness about the issue. And one day suddenly the bulldozers went into the park and started to take out the trees. They immediately went down to the park to stop them.
Protests are quite common occurrence in Istanbul and most of big cities in Turkey at various sizes. In the initial 2 days before it took over the whole city, I had counted 5 or 6 groups. When those photos were taken, there were Kurds there, there were 2 anarchist groups, feminists were there.
It was basically to rescue the park for me in the smaller scale of the protests. And because of the police reaction and the violence, etc., it grew and it started to represent something even much bigger than the park.
I asked activist Mehmet Uludag if he thought the protest was to be expected.
I think the common sort of thinking in Turkey about whether they were expected or not is such that it wasn't really. Well, it wasn't expected to the scale that we saw, and it wasn't expected at the time, as many people thought, both from the government side, both from the protesters' angle and from the police's angle, obviously. But at the same time, it's not as black and white, I think, as it sort of has been reported. Oh, unexpected protests, suddenly it blows up into massive demonstrations around the country, etc. Because when you look at the last couple of years in Turkey, and one has to understand these things in terms of the context of it, in terms of the history, background of it, there were lots of sections of the society who were unhappy with what has been done in the country. There were lots of disadvantaged groups in the country who had grievances with the government and its policies. The current government is in power for the last 11 years as a single party, very popular by the way, high vote rate behind it, government, and it's its third term. I mean, it is obviously a sort of a central right-wing neoliberal government, and it has implemented neoliberal agendas as well as some reforms, as one always sees with these governments, but it has also angered a lot of sections of the society. In the following days, as this protest was growing, a lot of sections of the society, political groups, as you said, anything from LGBT activists to sex workers to revolutionary Muslims to anti-capitalist Muslims to revolutionary socialists to anarchists, a lot of groups came first in solidarity, first of all. Secondly, also, they had their own issues they wanted to raise, and the park became sort of a platform of democracy, where not only issues were discussed, not only issues were raised, and not only things were said in the sense that, isn't that too bad, isn't that terrible, also, where do we go next from here?
Women participation in this resistance is not a contribution, as it is always perceived, or would, people would like to perceive it as a contribution. I see it as an active participation, an important role, and I think, my view is shared by non-feminists as well, by broad sections of the society. They were there from day first. Mothers came out, we talked about it before, and they weren't necessarily radical lefty mothers. Quite few of them were your ordinary mothers with 2 kids and the pot boiling in the kitchen. I found it quite moving that mothers came that particular night when the Prime Minister called out the families and mothers in particular to come and fetch their children, otherwise they'd be treated as terrorists. Mothers came out, made a human chain around the park and the protesters, and they said, here we are, we're not going. That doesn't come out of blue. That's reflective of a feminist sentiment and feminist backlash in many ways. There are background to it, but that takes another program. In general, Turkey is relatively liberal enough society for not to, look down on women's participation in such protests. It's not unusual anyway. It's always been half and half. So.
Biz genciz. Yaşlıyız. Biz emekçiyiz. Biz kadınız. Erkeğiz. Biz eşcinseliz. Biz Ermeniyiz. Türküz. Kürdüz. Aleviyiz.
Class division has always been there. There's the imperial heritage that, what you have as lords and, landowners we had as beys and pashas and commanders. Class division has always been there, but the gap between classes, yes, it's widened more than ever before, ever before.
There are lots of minority groups or groups with lower income or gays and lesbian groups. I mean, that's some place where everyone somehow engages with or lives. So of course, that kind of diversity is not necessarily wanted in this kind of a regeneration project. So slowly, people are pushed out of that. That's kind of why people are protesting and why so many different groups were involved in the protests.
Obviously, people being kicked out of the park brutally were quite keen not to finish and stop there. And what they did is actually, if Gezi Park was not a place that they can get organized, they can talk politics, they can raise issues, they could do that in their own neighborhoods. And within the following couple of days, we saw different type of protests, but as well as neighborhoods getting organized in their own local parks and calling the neighborhood forums, and at times there were up to 37, 40 districts in Istanbul running simultaneous neighborhood forums, and some of these forums were attended by up to 10,000 people.
Meclisimizi kuruyoruz. Kendi meclisimizi açık forumumuzu yapıyoruz. Hepimizin sözüne açık bir zemin kuruyoruz.
Forums, by the way, are not only taking place in Istanbul. It's taking place in Izmir. It's going in Ankara, in the capital. It's going in Mersin in the south too, and Antalya and Adana.
The beauty of these forums is, again, neighborhoods discussing not only sort of wider issues in Turkey, the whole specific issue of Gezi Park, but also they start discussing the neighborhood issues. And that is sort of a form of democracy in a sense. It's quite non-hierarchical, and everyone get their voices, and some neighborhoods decide to focus on certain elements of politics, some neighborhoods decide on something else.
There's slow mechanisms at the moment. For example, Gezi Park meetings in Istanbul, where Beşiktaş, where that famous football club is backing, they called on the first satellite forum in that park. At some nights there are 10,000 people in the park.
İktidara geldiği günden beri kadın bedenine dönük politika yapma noktasında sınır tanımadı. Biliyorsunuz geçen yıl kadına dönük kürtaj yasasının yasaklanmasıyla birlikte kadın kitleleri sokağa dökülmüştü ve Tayyip Erdoğan da hesap sormuştu.
But there are a lot of serious, quick decisions and democratic decisions, and a lot of excellent debate going on in these meetings at the moment.
The process is ongoing, and it is, I think, a brilliant example how people don't have to give in to police brutality, or how people don't have to be in hundreds of thousands of masses before they can get up and act on things, start acting on things.
Ronan Burtonshaw and Tommy Gavin of Rabble magazine travelled to Istanbul and reported live from Gezi Park. Their reports were translated into Turkish at a time when the Turkish mainstream media were not reporting on this issue at all.
Did the left play a big role in this, or was it a collection of groups?
I think at the start, there's no question, it wasn't initiated by the left. The protests were initiated by a combination of environmental activists, as Tommy said, with Greenpeace, and then also, to varying degrees, community activists, people from around the Taksim area of Istanbul. But once the confrontations became larger, once the police became involved, then you began to get visible left-wing presence where they moved into the park as groups set up the tents, but also they were trying to join some of the organisations that were being set up in defence of the park, whether it be Taksim Solidarity or the platform. They were, and once it spilled out into the very large national protests, and you got things like barricades being built, you got marches being organised, that's when organised forces, whether they be the left-wing political parties or the unions like DISC and KESK, that's when they came to the fore, when they had the ability to get involved in some of the more organised aspects. But it's worth going back to the timeline to think about the way in which the protest kind of mushroomed across Turkey. Is you had Friday morning and the early morning raid on Gezi Park, which spilled out into Taksim Square, and where you had some of the more well-known incidents. So where in one instance protesters, in addition to just commuters, were locked into Taksim metro station and tear gas was fired in after them, which was reported not in the Turkish media.
As well. I mean, that was one of the key.
Yeah, they locked them in.
They locked them in, and
galvanizing events.
Really enormously galvanizing, also over things like social media. As opposed to the Turkish mainstream media, the vast majority of the protests were ignored by the Turkish mainstream media, at least for the beginning of the uprising.
One thing I'm not sure if you can shed much light on this or not is the role that the ultras, the football ultras, played. The fact that they were able to all come together, which is highly unusual.
that was huge as well. That was one of the. I mean, people were talking about it's insane to have these two flags together. I mean, people were saying, it was just like, oh my God, did you hear about how the Fenerbahce supporters were cornered by the police last night, and then the Galatasaray supporters came and saved them? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, it was. You got an appreciation very quickly of how unusual and important that was. Because the three biggest fan groups are the Ultra Aslan, who are Galatasaray, Vamos Bien, Fenerbahce, and Çarşı, who are Beşiktaş. Now, Çarşı have nominally anarchist politics. The other two are not politically aligned, but they came together and they arrived down into Istiklal towards Taksim Square and gathered at the time their club was founded, and they agreed then that they would all arrive at those times, and then they'd march behind a single banner, and there was a very very large crowd of ultras there. In situations like this, where the police are being deliberately heavy-handed, they're trying. It wasn't just as we would consider standard crowd dispersal tactics. There was punishment. This was the intention to harm, hurt people as a lesson, as a disincentive for people to come back the next day. So when you have groups who are like the ultras, used to street fighting, who are organised enough to coordinate a street battle with police, who are well schooled in this enough to be able to create a barricade. Exactly, but also things like if you've got a group of people who are willing to go 10 meters further forward than the rest of the crowd and fight the police, whether it be that they force them back or not, it gives great encouragement to those behind who are not as used to it. And you saw that whether it was the revolutionaries who were doing it or whether it was the ultras, they also were instrumental in creating the barricades and leading that kind of for the days in which they held Taksim Square, for holding the square, because they were willing to maintain the fight through the night with the police.
That looks bad. Yeah. That looks pretty bad. I think it's Toma. It's a truck.
Taksim Square it's a big square, big roundabout, many roads join together, and it's a huge traffic jam over there all the time. And very middle of city, center of the tourism part, it's very, very chaotic place. So city council made a huge project to put the traffic underground of Taksim Square, of that roundabout, and open that square to public. So city council, part of the top of the square work, they want to push the pedestrian part into Park way, which is the environmental activist was over there. So they didn't move. So council workers, and around 30 of them, it was very beginning of start like this, they had a push and pull, and then council workers pushed them out, and they burned their tents.
The original demonstrations were peaceful, by people against a redevelopment project that included a shopping complex.
And then they came back 500, council called the police, police moved them out, they came back 3,000 with and so on, and everybody know after what happened actually.
Turkish riot police have moved in on Taksim Square in central Istanbul. They've fired tear gas and water cannon at hundreds of anti-government protesters who've been camped out in the area for 2 weeks.
Çadırların bulunduğu bölgeye çok sayıda gaz bombası atıldı. Şu an burası gaz altında ama.
It was very sad, especially when you're living in Ireland, abroad, and looking at Turkey, like opening newspapers, big pictures on it, some injured people, tear gas affected people, injured, bloody faces.
What the police did, okay, what the police did, I think it started after those marginal groups added, because when you see the crowd, okay, it's generally very difficult to spray those people. They use some gas, as you know, okay.
Police shooting tear gas, and they throwing to police like ground bricks. They throwing petrol bombs to police. They throwing screws with the swing shots to police. Police using water cannons to them, throwing tear gas. So it was very, very chaotic and like very, I have to say, ugly pictures it was.
State tried everything to provoke violent clashes, everything.
Police has worked with the law. They have to protect the society. They have to protect to themselves as well.
We are confronting very heavy police terror. Tear gas bombs are everywhere. I got stuck in the metro. They threw a gas bomb in and then closed the doors.
They were not only themselves, they were under command. Okay, so they had to do what they were told. Absolutely. I mean, they were just to target the police, board of police. It was police one of us. I mean, when they take their uniform, your brother, my brother, friend, you know, it's in Turkey, they live in the part of the society.
Efendim? Basın kartın var mı? Var. Tamam bir göreyim. Oradan geldim zaten. İkincisi de artık polisi çekmeyin ya. Çekmeyin polisi. Göstericileri çek. Burayı çek. Çekme polisi ya. Polis günah keçisi mi? Çıldırttınız adamı. Basın yazıyor. Polis gaz attı. Ne atayım? Osurayım mı? Ne atayım? Osurayım mı? Ne yapayım? Silah mı kullanayım? Devam et, beni delirtme. Basınsın ya. Çok güzel basınsın. Çok güzel basınsın.
The media were expecting much more. They came and they see that, hello, it's just a protesta, even in our Wall Street, so in USA, okay, or also in Dame Street, okay. I also saw much more crowds like that.
I think at a time when Turkey is featuring on our TV screens every night, in our newspapers every morning, it would be remiss of us to have a leading civil servant from Turkey here to discuss with members of the European Parliament and not to raise the question that is putting it onto the news, which is the massive, brutal suppression of peaceful protesters.
Yeah, I suppose what happened in the International Trade Committee, it epitomises right there in that moment the approach of the European Union to these questions.
I was in Istanbul just over a week ago, where I personally witnessed the massive use of tear gas indiscriminately against peaceful protesters, where I personally witnessed the massive use of water cannons indiscriminately against peaceful protesters, the use of flashbang grenades, extreme violence against peaceful protesters. And my understanding from talking to people on the ground, the likes of Amnesty International, is that the situation has significantly worsened since then.
So we have a very leading civil servant from Turkey coming to the International Trade Committee while all this onslaught is going on. Basically no one else talks about this at all. I start to speak and I say, look, we can't ignore this question. We have to talk about, at that stage they were using tear gas in the water cannon.
The allegation is widespread and seems to be confirmed by photographic evidence, is that there are now additives being put into the water used in the water cannon.
The detention of lawyers, the denial of freedom of speech, the arrest of journalists, we can't not talk about these things. And the reaction of the chair, who's a so-called social democrat, was to shut me up.
Murphy,
these
could
questions
you address
are relevant.
our topic, please?
Well, I think this is relevant to our relations with Turkey. Is it founded on the basis of human rights?
Leave it to me whether it is relevant or not. Please address the topic.
Well, I'm going to make the case that this is relevant, right? That where doctors are arrested for treating protesters.
If you insist.
Where lawyers are
I'll
arrested.
put an end to your intervention.
It's typical, because what they say is trade, human rights is human rights. Don't mix up the two. And so there's no political discussion about on what basis is trade relations built upon. That they just see it as two separate things. And so the European Union will pursue its economic agenda, which is based on free trade, which is based on expansion of the European Union. Separately, they'll throw a few words in about human rights and democracy, because that's supposedly what the European Union is built on. But actually what's important for them is the economic agenda and the interests of big business within Europe.
Scenes like these in Turkey led some in Europe to question whether it was right to continue EU membership talks with the Turkish government.
The question of accession of Turkey to the EU is a complicated question within Europe, because while you have a significant section of the establishments within Europe who want Turkey to accede because, well, it's part of the imperialist ambitions of Europe expanding east, economically integrating Turkey, an economy that's growing in contrast to most of Europe. But also within the establishments within Europe, you have a section that are opposed to accession, basically for racist reasons, because they consider Turkey to be a non-European Muslim country, that it would destabilize the European character of the European Union.
Since last 5 years, we opened 14 chapters of the joining EU. And this is 14 chapters opened so far in 5 years, but it was very slow. This is my opinion, EU is a university and Turkey is an accepted student in that university, and for the graduate have to do 33 chapters. Okay, that's very, like, if we simplify, and 33 chapters, the exams, we did 14 so far, but every semester head of the university is changed. And how we can graduate, I don't know as well. Okay, that's the very slow process for us.
From the Turkish point of view, it's clear that the majority of the establishment would like to accede, but also things have become colder in recent period because Turkey is growing as its economy, but also as a regional power. With the so-called Arab Spring, the Turkish regime feels more powerful, the AKP party, its connections with the Muslim Brotherhood, with Ennahda in Tunisia. And so that's like a complicated background to the situation.
EU and Turkey relations, it's like feeling not very fair way it works. And thank God, last EU had presidency was Ireland, and our EU minister was here, and he was so happy to see Ireland had the term of presidency. He said, this is his words, with Ireland we started EU engine again and we warmed it up. So on we can gear up now to join EU. So Ireland, it's triggered again the Turkish joining EU processes.
My name is Ali Yılmaz. I am the director of Turkish-Irish Business Development Association, which has been established in 2008 by Turkish and Irish businessmen in Ireland. We are the official partner of the Turkish Confederation of Industries and Businessmen in Turkey, and also official partner of the European Turkish Business Confederation. You know, the Turkish economy has been going well for the last couple of years. Turkish economy was the third in the world in terms of growth rate and the first in Europe last year. So this Gezi Park protest has been much negative effect in Turkish economy, especially starting with tourism and some food especially. So the Turkish economy has been affected by those protests extremely, I should say millions of dollars, millions of euros. So, and those businessmen and trade people in that area and also in other parts of Turkey where those protests happen has been affected extremely negatively.
The Turkey economy is getting bigger and bigger every day, so maybe some people are not happy about these situations, because it's a rule in the world. If you would like to get higher, you step on someone. So because of that, okay, I think those people are not happy about this growth in Turkey. So they are using such kind of things.
We see in the TV some protests by the people who sell their goods there, because they started to anti-protest there because they started affecting extremely negatively. So this is another aspect of Gezi Park.
When they speak about the 6 trees, okay, but now, sorry, the millions of euro, okay, the Turkey lost, and with those money, I can have maybe thousands of Gezi Park.
İnşallah orada hem kışlamızı yapacağız, alışveriş merkezinden toplantı salonlarına kadar, belki rezidans, otel vesaire.
Değerli arkadaşlar, buradayız. Çok görkemliyiz.
Kesilen 5-10 tane ağaç meselesi değildir, ideoloji.
Doğayı ve çevreyi seviyorum ve bu dünyanın bizim olduğunu düşünüyorum.
Ne yaparsanız yapın. Biz kararı verdik, verdiğimiz gibi bunu işleyeceğiz. Herhalde ben bunun iznini gidip de bu birkaç tane çapulcudan da alacak değilim.
sadece evimde oturur, çocuklarıma odanı topla, tabaklarını mutfağa götür derim. Yemek hazırlarım, ortalık süpürürüm. Emekliyim aynı zamanda. Hükümet bize soruyor, bunlar kimdir diye. Ve ben şimdi burada kimliğimi açıklamak için bulunuyorum. Benim nüfus kağıdımda ve pasaportumda Türkiye Cumhuriyeti vatandaşı yazıyor. Ve Türkiye vatanı sınırlarında yaşıyorum. Etnik grubumu sorarsanız ben Ermeniyim, ben Kürt'üm, ben Sazayım, ben Lazım, ben Çerkezim, ben her şeyim. Eğer dinimi sorarsanız ben Hristiyanım, Müslümanım, Yahudiyim, ben Budistim, ben her türlü dine sahibim, ben ateistim ve bu toprağın yurttaşıyım. Bu onlar
bir öyle bir böyle kelamlardan, yasaklardan illallah. Başına buyruk kararlardan, fermanlardan illallah. Bir öyle bir böyle kelamlardan, yasaklardan illallah. Başına buyruk kararlardan, fermanlardan illallah.